Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated.
Hey folks, it's Jason High, joined by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway. We also have a special guest today, State Senator Blake Tillery, who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee. Buzz, Scott, good to see you as always. Blake, Senator Tillery, Chairman Tillery, it's good to have you join us this week. And I know you're going to jump in here in a second to discuss a very pressing topic. And because we don't want to keep you, we're going to go pay some bills real fast, and we'll be right back.
Good.
Americans for Prosperity is excited to announce the launch of our REINS campaign, aiming to implement bold regulatory reforms that reduce government overreach and promote economic freedom. Join Americans for Prosperity in advancing for policies that empower individuals and businesses to thrive. Learn more and get involved at afpgeorgia.com. And together, you can help build a more prosperous Georgia.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to Golden and Labrador Retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
So yesterday, guys, I had to go up to the Imperial City, Washington, D.C., and it was a super interesting day to be up there. I got up way too early in the morning, and Senator Tillery, in case you know, I live in the Richmond area, so it's about two and a half hours, depending on how bad 95 is, on my way up to D.C. And so I tuned in a little bit to CNN before switching over to podcasts, or maybe it was after I listened to podcasts, and caught some news before as I was approaching 395. And I hear this thing about this memo that the Office of Management and Budget, for those of you who don't know, the Office of Management and Budget is a part of the White House, that they are when the White House takes a position on a piece of legislation, it goes through OMB. Budget and appropriation stuff goes through OMB. They also house ORIRA, which reviews every federal regulation that comes through any administration. But OMB issued a administration-wide memo yesterday that essentially froze federal spending. And I hesitate. I'm sorry if I'm not clear on what exactly I mean by that, because I'm not sure the White House or Office of Management and Budget is clear on what that means, because based on the memo, the only thing that was exempted was Social Security and Medicare. They later clarified that Medicaid was not supposed to be part of that, even though we had heard throughout the day that the Medicaid payment portal, it was down in a number of states. Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon said it was down in all 50 states. I had heard a number of states, but I personally don't know if it was all 50 or not. I don't want to belabor the point on, because I know we're going to discuss this, but I think a lot of people are really wondering how this affects the citizens of my home state, the great state of Georgia, go Dogs, and trying to figure out, just want to know what the hell's happening. And I wish we had a really good answer. What I can tell you about what's going on right now is that there was a temporary restraining order, an injunction that lasts until Monday of next week, that blocks the implementation of this order from OMB. The White House, the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, rescinded this order today. And then to make things even more hazy, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, I can't remember her first name, she said that the order still applies, even they rescinded the OMB order basically to get around the court ruling, the TRO. And before we came on, I read that there's a second judge who's also about to weigh in on this too. So there's a lot of confusion. and haziness around this around this order from this memo, I guess I should say, from OMB, that's creating a lot of uncertainty for people who receive federal benefits or organizations that receive grants from the federal government, because initially the way it was framed was this was about loans and grants, but it appears to have been more than that. A lot of people are trying to get clarification. A lot of people are trying to make sense of this. But what does it mean for you, the dear citizen of the great state of Georgia? And Chairman Tillery, I hope you can shed some light on this for us, because you guys are right in the middle of session. I know that little budgets and big budgets are coming up. Can you clarify what this means for folks?
Look, I don't know that I can clarify what happens at the federal level, but I can at least make you rest assured that we're going to be safe here in Georgia. And so, first of all, Jason, thank y'all for letting me be on. Scott, Buzz, we missed you guys down here at the Capitol. You guys were always fun to talk to. And let's just talk about that issue generally. President Trump was elected to be a disruptor. He was a disruptor in 2017. He's a disruptor now in 2025. That's what people want. I don't have any problem at all with us reining in federal spending. The problem that we often laughed about, Scott, Buzz, you and I got to talk about it often, is everyone thought it was pork spending until it was in their backyard. And that's what you saw here, is folks thought it was pork. And then it's like, but hang on, that's not pork. That's meat. that's bacon. That's the good stuff. Well, so the order as it stood, as it came out originally, you're right, Jason, you hit the nail on the head. It froze everything except for Social Security payments and then your Medicare payments. Medicare, of course, benefits usually folks over 65, 67, depending on your retirement age. Medicaid is the state-run program that was started under the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson and brought in Title 16 benefits of the federal code. And that's where Georgia is a partner with the federal government in spending on healthcare needs usually. And to be eligible for Medicaid, you have to show that you have certain levels of assets that are below certain target areas, depending on different things like age. We cover a lot. There's a little bit higher coverage for Peach Care. If you're an expecting mother, we go a little bit higher on the federal poverty level. If you're not an expectant mother, if you're not a child, then really you got to show you have less than $1,000 of assets and have some physical disability of some sort. So how does that payment get made? Well, every state has something called an FMAP. And Jason, if you had told me you were going to ask this question, I would have looked up the acronym for FMAP. But it's
federal matching assistance program, I think.
See, you're better at this than me. You got me on your show to be the expert, and you already knew the answers. That's great. But what it means for Georgia is essentially every state is weighed out in its poverty ratings, and each state has a different FMAP percentage. In Georgia, our percentage is roughly 33% for state pay, 67% from the federal pay. And that money put together creates our Medicaid bucket that we pay Medicaid funds for the rest of our citizens in Georgia. It's our second largest expense. It's roughly, combined with the state health benefit plan, 23% of our budget. It's big dollars. Just Medicaid spending in Georgia, just Medicaid provider spending, so the money we send out to Georgia hospitals and Georgia doctors, is roughly $30 million a day. So even a 3-day pause, pretty big dollars, and affects communities, certainly. I'm not arguing against that at all. I'll tell you this, though. In this scenario, this is exactly why Governor Nathan Deal said he didn't think that Georgia should expand Medicaid. He said one day the feds are going to do something different. And when they do, we have to be able to cover our share. So those folks who went to the 90-10 match when they expanded Medicaid to 138% of the poverty level under President Obama, they should have been scared. Georgia didn't have to worry nearly as much about that. One, we've been great stewards of your taxpayer dollars, returned $3 billion in the past 3 years. And we also kept a little bit in the bank, about roughly 4 months worth. So we've got $13 billion. Can we handle $30 million of payments a day? We could. Would it be comfortable? It wouldn't be fun, but we wouldn't go broke, and we wouldn't let hospitals go broke. And would they get this sucker settled before we ran out of money? You know they would. So I support the president's move. I'm glad he did what he did. I hope that he will continue his Doge Commission and everything else, be tight on federal spending. And those people who are listening to her from Georgia, just know that if this comes up again, if the rescission of the order and replacement of the order was done just to get around a TRO, because of the frugal spending, the tight conservative spending that Scott and Buzz started, and that's been continued under Governor Kemp.
You're welcome, Georgia.
Just fine.
So I do want to know real fast. I had to Google quickly the word the acronym for FMAP, Federal Medical Assistance Percentage. Because the last time I worked on Medicaid directly was probably 2017 during the healthcare the Obamacare repeal or replace debate, and then I've recently reopened it back up because of the potential extension of TCJA. In my second job at the Independence Center, I've had to pay close attention to it. Before I get into the legality, I want to discuss the legality of this. And Senator Tillery,
I have a question about the budget process.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Scott and Buzz, see what questions they have.
Yeah. So we know, like last week, you guys were in budget hearings. Budget hearings continue on. Is this going to create a stall in that process at all? Are you guys going to have to wait and see a little bit, or is it business as normal?
Oh man, so here you go, Scott. You're bringing your institutional knowledge here, and Scott, I don't think you were here at this point in time, but Buzz, you may have been when we actually had to pause session for a few days to see if the feds were going to continue the Peach Care program. But were you here during that time, Buzz?
I was, yes.
So
yep.
That has happened in the past. That's not where we sit now. Georgia was frugal. Georgia was conservative with its funds. Georgia didn't expand Medicaid, which probably would have put us in a little bit more of a bind. So the short answer to your question, Scott, which I'm dragging out, just hoping you feel the airtime here, is no. We're not going to have to pause. The one thing you did say, though, that was a little bit different is we didn't have budget hearings last week. Remember, the snow in South Georgia knocked us down. We have, in my neck of the woods, we're still dealing with tons of storm damage. You got blue tarps on every third roof. We just threw 4 inches of snow and ice on top of those last week. So we didn't get through budget hearings. We're catching up on those now. It means we're working a little bit later at night, but that's kind of what y'all sent us here to do.
Thank you.
I don't really have I don't necessarily have a question, Blake, but or Chairman Tillery, excuse me. I was at the Capitol all day yesterday.
First time you've ever called me that, by the way. I understand. There must be a budget ask coming right afterwards.
Yeah, I'll come see you. No. I didn't hear anything about this. I was at the Capitol doing, my day job, and late in the afternoon, a lobbyist wanted to come see me, so I went to see him, and he is freaking out, absolutely freaking out. And he comes running up to me and goes, "Buzz, Trump just shut down DFACS." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" He said, "I don't know. He just waved his magic wand and DFACS is shut down." I said, "Well, I don't, not to call BS. I don't know how the heck the president of the United States could wave his magic wand and shut down DFACS here in Georgia." But then I got home and started reading some of this, and it's a fascinating thing. And I think, like you, we absolutely have to tackle spending at the federal level, and we can debate, and I think we will debate. Did this get kicked off the right way? But at least finally somebody in Washington is thinking about how the heck are we going to spend less money than we did before. And so, and I appreciate you, Chairman, for you have helped contribute to that frugality and that frugal nature that Georgia operates under, and that's part of the reason why we have this big surplus. And when hiccups happen in Washington, it doesn't put us on edge.
So go ahead. I'm sorry, Chairman.
And remember, the feds they have state funds that come in for different things. Department of Transportation, DFACS, as you've already hit on pretty hard, Department of Human Services. The federal budgets, the state general fund budget, our total budget is probably around $67 billion. Our general funds is about 37-ish, $38 billion. So you do have substantial federal funds spent in Georgia. But when you've built up, that's why it is important to have that roughly 4 months reserve for things like this. And 4 months is a lot. We're in a healthy position, but that's why I can confidently tell you Georgia citizens are going to be fine.
So one of the things you mentioned FMAP, and I think it's important to kind of hang around that topic for a moment because, and Scott, I can't remember if this is in the agenda or not, but there has been there's a group of legislators, obviously most, if not all, Democrats, as well as a handful of Republicans, who want Georgia to expand Medicaid. Having kept an eye on budget reconciliation, which based on a timeline I saw this week, the House Budget Committee and the U.S. House of Representatives could get marked up as soon as next week, and then that's going to kick off, going to the floor, starting that whole process. Then the committees do their work. There's about a 50-page menu of proposed cuts, some increases, various things that they need to do to pay for an extension of the 2017 tax cuts. A 10-year extension of just the tax cuts, nothing else added to it's $4.6 trillion over 10 years. That's an increase in the deficit if there are no pay-fors. So they're looking for things, and one of the things they're looking at is that 90% matching rate that states get for expanding Medicaid. So this is one of those things that you may think this is free money, but we're talking $656 billion program in FY 2025 alone. Mandatory spending in its entirety, 60% of the federal budget. You got to find areas to cut, or at least to modernize, to reduce the amount you're spending. Medicaid provides a convenient way to address those problems.
We predicted this. Those of us who've been fighting against Medicaid expansion in Georgia, this is exactly what we said would happen, because we cannot continue to do deficit spending forever. And we were told that we were heartless when we were making those comments. What, 10 years ago?
You're heartless for different reasons.
Well, but it's true though. The Obamacare model is unsustainable.
Yep.
And there was always going to be a time when the piper was going to have to be paid. And now we're seeing the piper is visible to us now. He's walking down the street. He's in our neighborhood. And very well, this now could be the time. And if it's not going to be now, it's going to be later. At some point, we're going to have to deal with these problems that have been created by these types of programs like Medicaid expansion in the states.
Yep.
So, but Senator Tillery, you've been very generous with your time. We know.
Thank you, guys.
Before we came on, you were on a FaceTime with your son, and I made the comment that I was blessed. I lived in Holly Springs. I was 40 miles away from the Gold Dome. I got to sleep in my own bed. I don't know how you guys do it. Mm-hmm. So I know there's somebody special you'd like to address before you head out.
The way you do it is you just do nothing very well, and that's probably how I made it to where I am. But no, y'all are so kind to be on. Jason, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Chairman.
Virtually. Buzz, Scott, we miss you guys down here. And John, good night, buddy. Go to bed. See you soon.
All righty. Thank you
Take
for your
care,
time,
Mr. Chairman.
See y'all soon. Have a good evening.
See you, Sarah.
So let's talk about the legality. The first piece of context I'll say is this is happening in the backdrop of a CR that expires on Friday, March 14th. It runs through Friday, March 14th. So there are discussions currently happening between House and Senate appropriators from both parties, as well as leadership, trying to hammer out a funding agreement that will fund the federal government for the rest of fiscal year 2025, which ends at the stroke of midnight, or I guess right at midnight, September 30th. So you have that problem. And the lack of the lack of trust that's being built up between Republicans and Democrats, particularly because Republicans aren't speaking out against this. And then secondly, you have two clauses in the Constitution, one in Article 1, Section 9, and another in Article 2. The Article 1, Section 9 very, very clearly says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriation made by law. That's the first clause. The second clause is irrelevant. And then you have Article 2, which says the president shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed. There is a power that the White House the president has, to rescind monies that have been appropriated by Congress. There is a process for that. There are contingencies that have to be set in place. They did none of that. And they're not even claiming the authority under that law, which is called the Impoundment Control Act. They're not even claiming that authority. In fact, they explicitly said this has nothing to do with ICA. They're just claiming broad executive power to do this, which is inherently unconstitutional, not to mention illegal. So I saw
if-
a lot. Go ahead.
I just want to play devil's advocate for a minute there, because the original memo that was rescinded indicated this was a temporary, and then I guess there's some executive orders which I haven't seen that sort of backed up the memo and how it was going to be executed specifically. However, we're in the middle of a change from one ideologically different executive branch to a completely different ideological executive branch between Biden and Trump. And there is a lot of mistrust from the current executive branch directed at the previous executive branch. And is it possible that they're looking at ways that perhaps the Biden administration was not spending the money the way it had been intended through appropriations acts and acts of Congress?
We discussed this on the impeachment of the text thread earlier, and I'll say what I told you there. I am not aware of an example. That's not to say an example doesn't exist. I'm just not personally aware of it. What I would say is, regardless of there being an example or not being an example, is irrelevant. The Constitution, the Impoundment Control Act, are very clear on what a president is supposed to do. If he doesn't like the appropriations as they exist right now, there is a process for him to submit a list of proposed rescissions to the Congress, and the Congress to take those actions. But after 45 days, if the Congress doesn't take any action, he has to release those funds for obligation. That's just a fact. That is the law. And this was done in 1974, I think. Yeah, it was the budget Act, and it was part of the Impoundment Control Act was part of the Budget Act. The Impoundment Control Act specifically was in response to Nixon's abuse of impounding funds. The Supreme Court said as much in 1975 in the train case, and that was even repeated, almost like it didn't matter when Scalia dissented in Clinton versus City of New York in I think 97, when they overturned when the Supreme Court overturned the line item veto. Scalia spoke of it as basically saying the court has already weighed in here, like saying that the president doesn't have the power just to willy-nilly impound funds.
Well, that's so I just want to be more specific than maybe in my question. So are appropriations so specific as to get granular in how each dollar is spent on a specific type of expenditure? Meaning, if there is a butterfly study from the University of Wisconsin, that those dollars must be spent that way? Or is it more like there's scientific research that needs to be performed, and it's more generic in that way in the appropriation?
I would say that there are times where the executive branch is given money to spend up to certain amounts at its discretion. Mm-hmm. There are some times where it's more specific, and there are times where Congress puts explicit prohibitions on expenditures. Like basically, you cannot use funding for X, Y, or Z. But let's use the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, because that's one I've directly worked on. The Justice Reinvestment Initiative is part of the Commerce, Justice, and Science appropriations bills. What they put in the language, from what I can remember drawing from memory here, is that the Bureau of Justice Assistance, Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance shall make available $45 million for criminal justice reform and recidivism reduction. They don't say which states, they don't say what methods of criminal justice reform or recidivism reduction have to be pursued. All that's done by guidance. So
if one administration wasn't spending that money the way that it was supposed to be, what is the mechanism to?
Let's go back one quick second. There is another way an administration can move around funds, but it has to be done with the consent of the four corners of the appropriations committees. Essentially, like if they want to shift around money for a purpose, they can. They just have to get sign off from the four corners. of the Appropriations Committee, and it's up to a certain dollar amount. I don't know what the dollar amount is off the top of my head. So they can shift money around, but it has to be some sort of legislative oversight of it with the four corners. So, but to more specifically answer your question, this is why we have oversight. There are 12 subcommittees on the House Appropriations Committee and Senate Appropriations Committee that conduct oversight of how money's being spent, not to mention various all the rest of the committees. There are more than 20 standing committees of the House, and I don't remember how many in the Senate, but each of them have oversight capability. And they will, if money's not being spent appropriately, they will haul department heads or agency heads before that committee and ask them why, in addition to the appropriation subcommittees doing the same thing. So, Buzz.
Well, I mean, just the bigger picture, I have no problem with an incoming president saying, I want to pause things and take a look at, how this money is being spent and does it reflect the priorities that I have. But I think, Jason, the problem is, and this is, as you described, there's a way to go about doing that. And it's not send a vague memo out on a Tuesday afternoon and freak everybody out. But I think, I remembered Conquest's second law of politics. Okay, old Gen Xers like me who grew up reading National Review might be familiar with this, but it's any organization that's not explicitly right wing will eventually become left wing. And so, if you think the federal government is not neutral, I would agree with you, and that it's been captured by the left. So I can understand a Trump coming in and saying, "Wait a minute, all this money is going to perpetrate things that and perpetuate things that I don't want to happen, and that I wasn't elected to do. Time out. We're going to look at this." But you got to do. And this is what frustrates me about MAGA. Frustrates me about certain elements of the NatCons. You got to follow the law, and you got to do things a certain way. There's all sorts of pretty much anything that Trump wants to do. There's a legal way to make it happen, and I know they just far too often they just ignore that. Oh, just send out a memo and do it. We'll do it anyway. We don't need the Congress. We don't need the procedures. Now he's governing by. I'm old enough to remember when conservatives didn't like government by executive order, and a lot of his executive orders I like, but I don't know. Maybe pass a budget that actually reflects the president's priorities. Maybe we could try that. I don't know.
Scott, Buzz, I think you asked too much. But and to clarify, when Congress passes a budget, they're only passing a budget for about 26% of federal spending. That's only the discretionary spending. It doesn't touch mandatory spending like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I pulled away for a quick second just to run the numbers. I want to give you guys, because I think you guys will find this quite interesting and maybe even darkly humorous. So the federal government, according to the Congressional Budget Office, will spend $7.028 trillion this year. That is the FY 2025 projection. As I mentioned before, mandatory spending is about 60% of that. Actually, it's a little over 60%. Mm-hmm. It's like 60.2%. The five biggest expenditures the federal government has: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, net interest, and defense. That, my friends, by itself, is more than half of federal spending.
Right. And that's why, look, I mean, this is getting far afield here, but if Elon Musk, he's booted out Vivek, but if Elon Musk
Vivek
wants to
says
do
he's running for governor, Buzz.
That's true. If Elon wants to get something done in Doge, you gotta tackle this mandatory spending, and you gotta tackle entitlement spending. And talk to me. We got ways to fix entitlement spending. We know how to do that at the Georgia Center for Opportunity. So just throwing that out there.
But it's the messaging line. I think people, because you talk about cutting mandatory spending. We can't, and this is where conservatives, and at least the few fiscal conservatives who are left, and libertarians as well, need to really refocus their messaging on this, because you can't take away Medicare, Social Security from people who are currently getting benefits. And I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying, Buzz.
No,
Not at all.
no, you're right. No,
I know
there's
you
ways
better than that.
Again, there's ways to do it. There's 30 seconds. The problem with the welfare system is it disincentivizes work and it disincentivizes marriage. That has to be tackled. That can only be tackled at the federal level. If you do that, then you put people on a path to self-sufficiency, and they work, they climb up the ladder and they earn their way off of it, and then there's fewer people on. You don't have to cut people and kick people off in a cruel fashion. Let them work. Let them do what they want to do, which is work. So that's it.
Scott, before I continue to blow your mind, I have just one or two other things to add, but I want to give you a chance to.
Well, 25 minutes before we came on the podcast, my dear mom, a Florida retiree, calls me and she says, I have a question for you, not as your mom, not as a constituent, but as an old lady. And I'm scared to death. What is he doing? And I asked her, what are you afraid of? Because this should not impact you at all. And she said, I heard he was freezing Social Security. I was like, Mom, where'd you hear that? She goes, I saw it on the internet. So I was like, I don't know where you saw that. You need to go, just turn off your computer, turn off your television, let this thing blow over. It will blow over. One way or another, it's going to get resolved, and it's not going to change your life at all. The sense of anxiety that you have right now is based upon people who want you to be consuming their media, and they want you to be panicked, so you'll tune in to them and listen to them, and you need to just stop. Just take a breath. I kept saying that sentence to her over and over again. She goes, well, what about Medicaid? And so I pulled up a CBS article and I read her the article out loud over the phone. I just did a random Google search. Did Trump freeze Medicaid? And we found a CBS article and I read it to her. I tried to tell my mom, look, just much like what Senator Tillery said at the top of the show, we're going to be fine. The specific programs that she relies on are not touched by these executive orders or the memo. So
yeah. And they've also clarified that SNAP's not included.
Right. And so there's been this public panic that has been created. And maybe it was because it caught everybody off guard. Yeah. Some of the other legislators that I've talked to are friends of ours that are deeply involved in the appropriation process in Georgia, are concerned with like organizations like the United Way not getting, or maybe even a local government getting.
Meals on Wheels.
Yes, things like those types of programs are definitely going to be impacted here because they go to organizations, not to individuals. So there's a lot of haziness still, but in the coming days, things will get clearer. And just like every other crisis that America faces, it seems like the panic is disproportionate to the actual thing that's happening. And in a lot of cases, there are some times when it's warranted. I don't want to seem like I'm whitewashing some of the worser things, but I'm not terribly concerned here. And other than the fact that there's going to be a reckoning when it comes to our spending at some point.
Yes.
And if this is the way it is done, I agree with Buzz. It needs to be in a constitutional and legal manner, first and foremost. And perhaps this can be the start of a much larger conversation that needs to be had. One of the criticisms I've had of Donald Trump is that he was a prolific spender in his first term. He added trillions of dollars to the national debt. And maybe he has taken that type of criticism from conservatives to heart, and he's trying in his own way to do it, even if it's sort of abuse of executive power. Yeah.
So before we move on, I just want to note a couple quick things. While we were sitting here, I was rerunning the math. So the top five programs: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Defense, and net interest, were 69.8% of federal spending last year. This year, they're projected to be almost 71% of federal spending. So just those five outlays. If you take away defense and Medicaid, it's hold on, I had it here a second ago. It is net interest, Medicare, Social Security is just under 50%. It's 49.3% of federal spending. So you can clear out, and I've said this before, You can clear out all of non-defense discretionary spending. Congratulations, you've brought the budget deficit to about $1 trillion.
Right.
Right. You know, and
It's
you know,
insane.
the Fed has they did cut interest rates by, what was it, half a basis point or a quarter basis point? I don't remember which. A while back. They are not doing it again.
Right.
They're not slashing interest rates, mainly because they want to get a sense of the economy once Trump starts enacting his agenda on tariffs. The immigration enforcement is going to have potentially catastrophic effects on food prices, particularly produce. So they want to see what the impact is going to be from those things. And even if you take that basis point cut or half basis point cut into account, mortgage interest rates are still at 7%, and the 10-year Treasury is still hovering around 5%. That is not a good sign. It's because investors are getting concerned about our debt and our deficits, which are only going to go up. We're going to be at the end of the 10-year budget window that the CBO just looked at. I mean, we're talking, my friends, about a $2.5 trillion budget deficit.
It's a couple trillion among friends.
Yeah, and I went back and looked at some of the CBO's alternative fiscal scenarios that they used to publish. They don't publish them I think there's been one in the past 3 or 4 years. Those things are actually pretty close to accurate in terms of the debt to GDP ratios, and because what CBO releases in its general numbers are just, this is what current law says. If they take into account congressional behavior, you get something entirely different.
Back when I was in college and studying, I minored in economics, I used to order and obtain the blue book, the actual printed federal budget every year, and just read over it for fun. So,
Nerd.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, let's go pay some more bills. We're going to come back. We have several other topics to discuss. So, Scott, go do that.
Paying bills.
Conservatives Concerned is a network of political and social conservatives who question the alignment of capital punishment with conservative principles and values. Our programs include educating conservatives about the failed death penalty system and mobilizing them to bring about its end. We come to this issue for a variety of reasons. Some believe that small government and the death penalty don't go together, especially when we compare the high costs of capital punishment to life without possibility of release. Some don't trust the state to get it right. We already know that some innocent people have been sentenced to death, and for others, it may already be too late. Some believe that the death penalty contradicts our values about protecting life. Find out more at conservativesconcerned.org.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, all of our Patreon messages are brought to us for the generosity of folks who partner up with us through patreon.com. If you too would like to be a Patreon, it's as little as $5 a month. You head to patreon.com/peachpundit and sign up for one of our tiers today. We'll add you to the people who rock. If you sign up at the $10 tier, you get to join us backstage. We had a pre-roll conversation with Senator Tillery that those who sign up at the $10 level got to see for themselves and will not be part of the actual recording. We have all kinds of extra content like that for our Patreon. So I'd encourage you, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit, sign up for one of those tiers. At the very least, hit the like button on whatever app you're listening to us on, and we would really appreciate a positive review. Thanks again to our Patreons.
Before we jump into our next quick segments, I do want to note that Scott and I had a lot of agreement last week on the podcast. And last night when Scott and I, because during my lonely 2-hour drive home from Washington, D.C., I called Scott and talked to him. about a couple personal things in addition to just this crap storm. You're welcome, Miss Laura, in Washington, D.C. And Reagan's not even here. She didn't have to police my language. So one of the things I mentioned was I don't want to get into the details of a friend here, but we talked about the 14th Amendment. Scott and I did very briefly, and I have a piece. I want to hawk my personal writing over at the Independent Center. It's independencenter.org. I have a piece over there about the 14th Amendment that I would encourage everybody to go read. And it's the title of the piece is just Congress intended to create birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. I go through the debate in Congress over the 14th Amendment, the existing Supreme Court jurisprudence, the standing precedent that is the Wong Kim Ark case, the 1898 case the Supreme Court heard. They went through the concept, the English common law concept of jus soli, which is in English common law being the bedrock of American law, including American constitutional law. So, but yeah, for those of you who don't think the 14th Amendment means what it says what it means, I encourage you to go read that piece because you're wrong.
But wait, I think it means that if you're born here, you're a citizen of the United States. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Oh, okay. Just clarify.
I was waiting for you to say, so I could say, and there exists more agreement between Scott and I. Scott, the listeners come to pay us. The listeners come to listen to us for you and me to fight.
Yeah,
like
they've told us
assholes. So. I'm sorry, Miss Laura. And
yeah, they've told us exactly that. We love it when you and Pi fight. I hear it all the time.
Buzz is way too nice. And I can in my 15 years or longer, I don't even remember how long I've known you, Buzz. Of knowing Buzz, I can think of one time where he and I disagreed. Scott and I disagree all the time. So anyway,
well, you shot
along.
in Peach Pundit, the text thread, you shot me down from talking about condoms for Hamas. So
no. Listen, no. I agree with Pi. Look, I'm agreeing with Pi on this.
I gotta put context around this because I'm gonna have to go back a little bit because earlier today we were talking about this order and Buzz. This is. I can't. It's like my virgin ears can't hear Buzz say anything. He said, "Well, I'm glad we stopped buying condoms for Hamas." And I said, "Do you want them to procreate?" And he goes, "Who has time for sex when there's a genocide on?" I said, "Buzz, please stop talking about sex."
I mean,
it's
look,
weird.
you can't say out of one side of your mouth, like Hamas and their supporters and stuff, that, oh my goodness, Israel is perpetrating a genocide in Gaza when you're receiving all these condoms. Okay, I mean, and when your population grows, that's a heck of a genocide there.
I was already going to hell for obvious reasons, but seeing you say that makes me feel like I'm sorry, Buzz.
There's hope
don't
for
ever
your
do
soul,
that.
Okay, there's hope.
Don't ever do that. Don't ever do that to me again. Anyway, tort reform.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Tort reform. We expect Governor Kim's legislative priority to be unveiled tomorrow, Thursday, for folks who are interested. This is always a very hot conservative topic, and there's apparently a group called Protecting American Consumers Together, which said on Wednesday it plans to spend more than $1 million to promote the legislative push. So it's part of the group's $10 million nationwide agenda. So they're spending 1/10 of their budget set aside for tort reform nationally on Governor Kip's signature legislative issue in the 2025 session. So Buzz, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we don't really know. Governor Kemp has talked about it, but he hasn't gotten down to specifics. And I think now we're going to get down to specifics and see what does he really mean when he talks about the need for tort reform. And we mentioned it a couple weeks ago when the governor offered his State of the State address. He expressed his desire that everybody come together, that Republicans and Democrats unite to do this in such a way that's good for business. I love his optimism, and I love his passion for bringing folks together. This is an issue that people do not want to come together on, and so we'll see.
Republicans have a hard time coming together on.
Yes, exactly. So we'll see, and I'm very interested in the specifics. But there are a lot of folks, as evidenced by this organization that is ready to spend money in support of it. There are a lot of folks who want this to happen, and I do agree with the governor that this would be good for our economy. Lawsuits are weighing us down, and you have to balance that, of course, with the rights of people who are harmed, et cetera, et cetera. That's all true, but it's become such a weight on our economy. I think the governor's right, and this is a good fight to pick. I did
Scott?
look up it looks like this group, the PACT, is part of the National Consumer League, and they've got a whole page set up, and this is part of it. Looks like to be part of a nationwide push to spend some money in support of this stuff.
So I think what we'll know when we see the bill. Nobody has seen the bill yet outside of the governor's team. And there are attorneys groups in Georgia over the last 10 years who have done a really good job of finding conservative attorneys in these rural areas, plaintiffs' attorneys, if you will, that are going to be naturally skeptical of anything that has to do with tort reform. And this is one of the hurdles that the governor is going to have to overcome. Smart, influential members of the legislature who practice law, who understand what the trade-offs are for any of these types of policies. Every policy has a trade-off. And that is going to be a sticking point. If this bill is very narrowly tailored, or if it's a series of bills that narrowly attack specific instances where tort reform is required, I think he has a higher chance of being successful, ultimately finding a bill finding its way to his desk for signage. If it's a giant package and it's like 100+ page bill, my prediction is that's probably a non-starter with a lot of members of his own party. So that's my take. I don't have anything to offer on the specifics of legislation because I don't know what's in it. But it will, his path to success will be determined, I think, by the length and breadth of what he's trying to accomplish.
So in the chat, one of our Patreons, Ryan, did note that he is paying $10 for this, which I presume to mean he's paying $10 for you and I to fight on the podcast every month. So just to fill the empty void we've left by the recent agreement, I did refer to you. I called you a scallywag and a downright unpleasant gentleman in the chat.
Well, on that, you and I will agree.
God, see, Scott.
Oh,
God, mercy. So Scott, I am told that you got confused by the quote fire burn signs that you saw at the Capitol on Tuesday.
Oh my gosh!
Wait, Ryan did say condoms for Hamas.
yeah.
That's what he
You're
was
welcome,
in the
referring
Ryan.
to.
You're welcome.
Yep, in the chat. Yeah, you're welcome. You weren't here for Stacey Abrams and the Twitter searches that Buzz did, Brian. That was another episode. Yeah.
And please, Wes Cantrell, please don't drive off into the ditch. Okay, please.
That was another dark moment in Peach Pundit podcast history.
It was the best moment in Peach Pundit podcast history, if you ask me. So, yeah, yesterday, the Colton Moore Clown Show came to the Capitol because it was State of the Judiciary, and he was allowed to go onto the floor of the House in a joint session. And there were, I don't know, Buzz, what would you put the number at? Like 50 to 100 or?
Yeah, 50,
maybe,
60.
Yeah, 50. I would, being generous, very generous, I'd say, well, fewer than 100, maybe about 50, somewhere between those two numbers. It's hard to tell how many people are on the third floor of the Capitol at any point in time. But there were people that had stickers on their chests, I stand with Colton. And one gentleman, and before I realized that this was the Colton Moore Clown Show, one gentleman had a giant poster board, and on it had the words "Fire Burns." And the first thing that I thought was, well, yeah,
yes, it does.
Fire does burn. Like, what should I make another one that says "Water's wet" and stand next to him? Like, is it a biblical reference? oh my gosh, it hit me later. He's talking about firing John Burns. Like, oh my, I am so stupid. I
realize I'm laughing while you're talking, and Buzz is laughing at what you're saying. I'm actually reading Ryan's comments. He goes, hey, Ryan just said, I flop with Colton.
Yeah.
Keep them coming, Ryan. Keep them coming, Ryan.
So that happened at the Capitol yesterday, but hopefully this is the mark of the end of the Colton Moore sideshow, because he's not going to get anything done during the legislative session. I was reminded yesterday by key members of the Republican caucus in the Senate that he is still not allowed to come back as a member of that caucus. It's interesting to me that he has trained his ire towards the House, and he's making all of these comments that are directly related to his fundraising ability for either himself or for groups that are closely affiliated and support him. But he's not trying to take on his own leadership for keeping him out of the Republican caucus in the Senate.
The sad thing is, if it weren't Colton Moore, there would be someone in the Senate who would be the next grifter in chief. And that's what I just really wish people understood, is that they're being played. They're being played by the people who support Colton. They're being played by Colton himself, that they're now part of his grift, and they probably don't realize it. It's an outrage manufacture machine. And I'm telling you right now, like, this is all the conservative movement has, is to manufacture outrage, and the left does it too. And I'm not absolving them of guilt here, but this is all they have, is to if you're pissed off, they can distract you while they do other stuff.
Yeah.
So I would even venture to argue that the reason, like, that the hyper partisanship that has so divided the country is to the benefit of the political class, who want to keep us divided so that they can do the things that they want to do while ignoring the big issues that face the country. Things like entitlement spending in nationally, for example.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, Arthur Brooks, when he was still head of American Enterprise Institute, used to talk about polling that showed that 93% of Americans at the time didn't like how divided we were politically. And then he would joke that the 7% who aren't are the people who profit from it. And that's what's going on. So I did have to chuckle. I saw on Facebook a person had very, very dramatic video of Colton Moore waving to the crowd who were cheering him as he entered the House chambers. And I imagine, no disrespect to the judiciary. I guess, having been down there 8 years, all these speeches, bless everybody, but
the state of judiciary is the most boring speech you could possibly sit through, with all due respect to every justice that came before the legislature.
Justice Boggs, that's great man. Yeah.
Justice Boggs swore me in. I have a great deal of respect for Justice Boggs. Let me tell you something. It is not a reward for Colton Moore to go into that room and listen to that speech.
Yeah.
That is pure punishment.
Just imagine fighting that hard to get in to hear the state of the judiciary speech. So,
it was the worst part of the job.
Moving along, I hate to interrupt you guys on the thrilling discussion that is the state of the judiciary speech, but so school boards are opting out of House Bill 581, and I'm hoping Scott can explain what the hell this is, because I have, or Buzz. Well, I'm guessing this is an education thing.
This is my fault.
Probably more of your.
No, if you remember last fall on the ballot in Georgia, there was. It's hard. I had to read it like 5 times. I had to Google it. I had to look up the bill. I've read the bill numerous times. I still really don't know what's going on. But our friend Shaw Blackman, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, this is his bill that got passed, and there was a constitutional amendment component of it. What it attempts to do here, and this is from an article that Scott sent us from the Upson Beacon, and this actually has one of the best explanations of what this is all about by Robert Dickey, one of the state reps who represents that area. This bill was passed in response to complaints the legislature heard from homeowners who needed relief from skyrocketing assessments on their property taxes. Now, that's fantastic. The caveat is that this allows school boards. It creates a process that allows school boards to opt out of that, and thus the counties that do, presumably you're going to see skyrocketing assessments once again on your property taxes, which is that's the biggest chunk of your property taxes go to pay for your schools. Nobody begrudges them that, but I know my own county, Gwinnett, if they haven't completed that process already, it's in the process of doing that. And there's others around the state that are doing it. And so I don't know. Well, I've heard some rumblings down at the Capitol that so many are opting or in the process of opting out that they may have to come back in and say you can't opt out anymore. And that will be a fun fight at the Capitol. So
Scott, let me ask you: is there? This. I'm so sorry if this is a complicated question, but I know before the Social Security Amendments Act in 1983, a number of local jurisdictions that wanted to do like teachers' retirement, for example, could opt out of Social Security. Is there precedent for something like that in Georgia? So if a school board that's already opted out, would they be forced to go back into it?
I can't think of one, Jason. Not that, again, to use your words, not that it doesn't exist. However, one of the it's a carrot and a stick type of thing. Mm-hmm. If they remain in the property value cap system created under HB 581, they're allowed to do what's called a floating local optional sales tax to offset the millage rate. Mm-hmm. And so the locals could potentially make more money depending on where you are. I would imagine Gwinnett County, they could make more money based upon the economic activity
they
there.
Can generate a lot of money through a sales tax.
A 1% sales tax, right? Yep. So they would be giving that up. So that's the carrot and stick that's built in there. That 1% local optional sales tax would be off limits to them if they opt out. And there's also complications too, because you have some school districts, like city school districts, that are cross county lines, and that creates complications as well. And that's this again. I tried to find, there were two different sources that I thought were really good, and one of them was out of Rome, because who's the state senator up there?
Senator, is that Chuck Hufstetler, right?
Chuck Hufstetler.
Very smart, knows these things.
Yeah, he's chairman of finance
yes.
in the Senate. So he was giving a very not emotional. He was giving a heartfelt explanation for why their local school system up in Floyd County in Rome should not be opting out. And they eventually backed off. They had started the process to opt out, and they're like, all right, we're going to cancel it. And I saw another article out in Augusta where they were considering it, but a former mayor out there said, hey, like, this there is no reason you should be having public hearing, because this constitutional amendment passed here with overwhelming majorities. You've already heard from the people.
Yeah.
And in order to opt out, they have to have 3 public hearings, and it all has to be wrapped up by March. I don't know to answer your question about the precedent, but there is a huge outcry among the people. This constitutional amendment passed with overwhelming majorities, and for local governments to say to our seniors and to people who are on fixed incomes, sorry, we're going to continue to ratchet up the assessed value of your property without any type of check. Is insane, when HB 581 specifically limits it. It doesn't cap it completely. It adjusts it to inflation as set by the Department of Revenue. So they can still go up, but it's going to be in coordination with the value of the dollar that we are able to spend and our spending power. So it is just, I can't imagine any local government looking at this and saying, yeah, I think I just want to raid everybody's piggy bank, and which is essentially what they're doing if they're opting out.
Well, part of the problem is when it comes to education, nobody wants to say no to spending more money because it's for the kids, and you've got this. I mean, I think I'm going to post it in the. A friend put this chart together today. Let's see if I can get it up there. That green line on the top there is education spending over the last number of years. It outstrips inflation by a large measure. The blue and yellow lines are the performance on the National Assessment of Education Proficiency, the NAEP scores. This is for the state of Georgia. Talking about a moral hazard, because it just spending goes up and up and up and up on.
And we're not getting a return
education.
on those dollars.
Right.
Real fast, before we go on to our next topic, I had dinner last night with my fiance, soon-to-be wife's younger brother, who is currently interning at Mike Pence's group, Advancing American Freedom. And he tweeted out something really funny yesterday. He said, just got the call, fired. I was the DEI coordinator for the Pentagon. My job was to put coexist stickers on the F-35s. And as of this morning, he had almost 5,000 retweets, 119,000 likes, and he had a 3.5 million views on his tweet. And he told us today that he's picked up over 1,000 followers since he posted it. He's more than doubled his followers. Well done. But I say all that to say that, since I did mention he works for as an intern for Advancing American Freedom, that they've been going pretty hard against RFK Jr.'s nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services. And from watching the hearing today, it didn't go well for him.
Good news for me.
Yes.
I like to hear that.
Yeah. Just from watching the hearing, I didn't get a chance to watch all of it. And since the hearing, I think Senator John Fetterman, who's become every Republican's favorite Democrat, has said that he's not even sure that RFK will get out of committee. Now, he will get out of committee if they want to continue to pursue the nomination. This actually happened. I had to clarify this for someone the other day. He will get out of committee if they want to have a floor vote. He just won't get out of committee with a favorable recommendation. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened to Clarence Thomas back in 89. But Pence's issue is largely the same as our good friend Eric Erickson's, mm-hmm. is that RFK Jr. is not just pro-choice, he is pro-choice up until the point of birth.
Yes.
Which even me as the lowly pro-choice member of the podcast has a problem with. Yeah. So I said it before. I'll say it again. There should be limitations on abortion.
It's also. He's a weird guy. He's been a weird guy. He has perpetrated false information for decades about vaccines. There's a vaccine. The anti-vax movement. People forget this. It started on the left in large measure because of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tuberculosis and so forth was increasing in the most liberal parts of this country long before the right decided to hate on vaccines that Trump created. So
no, it's actually. I was reading yesterday that TB is actually on the rise in one county in like Kansas or something like that.
No, that's great news to hear. Thank you, Robert F. Kennedy. But this was Eric Erickson sent out. If you're not subscribed to his Substack, go be a subscriber to Eric Erickson. You'll get a good balanced perspective from the conservative side. He's intellectually honest, but here was his take, and I'm going to read it. Robert F. Kennedy induced his wife to commit suicide and then refused to give her body over to her family who loved her. After her showy Kennedy family funeral, he had her body dug up and removed from the Kennedy family plot. That's the man we're dealing with. He's all show, and like any privileged brat from an iconic American family, he has embraced every deluded and insane view imaginable. Kennedy believes Lyme disease was a military plot. He believes chemtrails are a real thing. Kennedy believes HIV is phony. He believes the CIA hypnotized his father's assassin. He believes COVID was developed to kill black and white people while sparing the Jews. He wants fossil fuels and nuclear power shut down in the country. He supports abortion until the moment of crowning when the baby is exiting the birth canal. He supports single-payer, nationally controlled health care. He opposes commercial farming. He believes anyone who rejects climate change is a traitor in need of prosecution. He believes in aggressive government gun control. He believes no vaccine is safe and effective, and better hygiene could prevent polio, smallpox, and other diseases. In his hearing today, he has completely misstated how Medicaid works and seems to not have even a basic understanding of the program. The Secretary of Health and Human Services plays a role in every one of these areas. In every one of these areas, Robert F. Kennedy is on the fringe of science and society. No, Senator Johnson, contrary to your statement in committee today, Robert F. Kennedy is not pro-science or even grounded in science, and some of you reading now would prefer to believe Kennedy has a sudden change of heart as he stands on the cusp of assessing the power to implement his insanity instead of wondering who this man is, that he can, for decades, have these long-standing and well-documented views and then conveniently convert at the last minute. The United States Senate should reject Robert F. Kennedy's nomination. Don't be like Cat Turd, who called him a fraud before saying anybody who's not voting for him must be bought by Big Pharma.
He also openly says that he's open to seizing drug patents.
Yeah, civil asset forfeiture for drug patents.
Good conservative policy right there.
I despite Eric, there are things Eric writes that I not all the time, not even half the time, but occasionally disagree with. So today I texted him and said, I love you. Sometimes you want to make me pound my head against a wall. Other times you're one of the few voices of reason. When it comes to RFK, you're a voice of reason. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that your issues with him do not end at abortion. Because I think his email today, because you could sign up for his newsletter on Substack. His email today was, as Scott just laid out, it ran the gamut of the problems with RFK Jr. and just watching the Republicans, not just on the finance committee, which is where he was today. I think he's going to be before health, education, labor, and pensions. Maybe tomorrow. I don't remember off the top of my head. But just watching them bend over backwards to justify supporting him is just, it was quite a sight to behold. The mental gymnastics you have to go through as a conservative to say he's pro-science, like one member said today, or like Senator Johnson, you're an answer to our prayers or something like that. I remember exactly what he said.
Change your prayers, brother.
Yeah, again, this for me runs far past abortion. It's everything else that Eric touched on. I don't know how you can justify supporting him unless you're just part of the cult of MAGA, in which case I'm not sure you have any real principles other than what Donald Trump says, and that's not principle. But I could literally go on for hours about all the problems with MAGA, and I know we don't have that kind of time. So we have a new segment for you guys because we're coming to the end of the podcast, and this is our quick hit segment. And the reason we have decided to do this is because each week we have found that we have other topics that we either don't get to because we've already run long because the three of us can't shut up. Particularly Scott Turner.
No. That's not how this works.
So there it is. Let the record know we disagree.
Finally, we found something you guys disagree on. Finally. So in our quick hit, I keep wanting to say quick hicks, like I'm talking about people who live in South Georgia.
We can change it to quick hicks.
No.
We'll put it on a t-shirt. No. Quick hicks.
So Speaker Burns headed up to D.C. today. He was there to be at the bill signing for the Lincoln Riley Act, which is the first piece of legislation that Trump is going to sign into law. So I don't know how this is supposed to work, but I'll give you guys real quick. 5 seconds.
It happened, and it's good stuff.
This is not only Speaker Burns, but also Burt Jones. When I posted that, I knew that Speaker Burns was going to be there. I didn't know that the Lieutenant Governor Jones was going to be there, but they were both in attendance along with Congressman Mike Collins, who was the author of the bill. So
he was the author of the House version. The Senate version is the one that got enacted.
But he was there.
So Scott noted that there was a huge turnout for Calvin Smyre, former state representative Calvin Smyre, who was nominated to serve as an ambassador during the Biden administration. I don't even think he got a hearing, which is truly unfortunate. But he served 48 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, and it was good to see that there was such a big turnout for him to honor someone who, whether you agree with his politics or not, dedicated his life to public service.
Yeah.
Yep.
Quick story. What I will remember for Calvin Smyre as Dean of the House, Democrat, long-serving Democrat, the longest-serving member to ever serve in the Georgia House of Representatives, 48 years, longer than I was alive the entire time I served with him. He had served longer. He began his term before my birthday. So he, at one point during the heartbeat bill debate, there was a representative named Renita Shannon from the Atlanta area who viewed herself as a historic figure. And we had limited debate to 1 hour for each side. And she had decided she was going to go in the well and filibuster. And she got to the end of the time. The speaker said that gentle lady's time has expired. She had eaten up all the time for the Democrats. And the debate was supposed to move on. And she would not leave the well. And so the speaker, after letting her go for a couple extra minutes, said, turned off her microphone and told her to leave the well. She refused. The speaker then threatened to have her removed by force using the Georgia Highway Patrol, which is something he's allowed to do. She refused. She continued to speak in the well. It was Calvin Smyre who stood up from his desk, walked to the well, put his arm around her, and guided her away because he was so protective of decorum in the House. And she had violated those rules of decorum by her actions. And I'll remember him for that always. And I was sitting in the chamber of the House. It's one of the first times I've been able to be in there where there are a lot of people in there since I left office. And I had my photo taken with him, shook his hand, congratulated him. And I sat down next to somebody who I used to serve with. And I said, was there anybody who got screwed harder by Joe Biden than Calvin Smyre? Because he had to resign his House seat in order to be considered. And he never even got considered seriously for the role that he had been nominated for. So, but congratulations to Smyre and his family. Huge turnout. Huge.
Buzz, Scott, quick hits is quickly turning into Scott filibusters. So you only have like 5 seconds, dude. So make it quick.
All right. It'll take more than 5 seconds, but I won't take very long. Something that meaningful that happened to me in an interaction with Calvin Smyre. There was a certain former member of the legislature on the Republican side who used to say racist things and get everybody in an uproar. I'm not going to mention his name.
I know who you're talking about.
Y'all who you're talking about. Yeah. And he did that one time, and I was particularly upset about it. And I wrote a speech, and I was going to deliver it to the in morning orders as by way of response to let the world know the Republican caucus doesn't agree with that. I went to the speaker. Speaker said, "Please wait one day." Yes, sir, I will. And I did. And I wanted to make sure I went to him because I don't want to make sure I wasn't going to violate the House rules because you can't. There's decorum. And the next day, speaker said, "Go right ahead." I delivered it, and first guy to come up to me afterward was Dean Smyre, and he thanked me, and he says, "Buzz, I had been urging my caucus to just sit tight, that somebody's going to respond. And if we, the Democrats, responded, then it would just cause further division in this House, and we don't need that." I had no idea he was doing that, and I had no idea that I was playing a role in helping him, speak to his caucus and say, let's hold off and let's, have peace in the House. And so that was very meaningful.
If you have video of that speech, I'd love to see it.
Okay.
It
can be found.
I've never seen that. I didn't even know you did that, and I would love to see it. Because
I'll try to dig it up. Yep.
Truly, you are one of the most thoughtful people I know, and I've long thought that, but I'll say it out loud. But
thanks.
Even though
look at Pi and I agreeing again.
Yeah. So we have our first two pieces of legislation going to the floor. Tomorrow we have SB 16, which is
17.
official. Well, the bill number
16?
you linked to.
I'm sorry, 16. Yeah, I'm back.
So I'm right. SB 16, which is elected officials and bail bonds, and then SR 7, which is a road naming. Again, first two pieces of legislation that will get floor votes during this legislative session. So, cool, I guess. Cool.
Yeah, I don't really know a lot of details. I'm more curious why SB 16 is brought by Matt Brass. It has to do with elected officials owning bail bond companies, but I don't know the details enough to speak about it. I just thought it was noteworthy that I think we're on Legislative Day 8. And we finally have a rules calendar in one of the chambers.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him. I'd love to know the backstory of that because it prohibits certain elected officials from being in the bail bonds business, which sort of makes sense. I mean, if you can go arrest you,
But it also
you
exempts
can,
certain specific, like school board members and county commissioners.
very interesting.
So, yeah.
So Congressman Andrew Clyde, who was the member of Congress who said that January 6th just looked like a normal tourist visit, despite the fact that there was feces on the walls, is getting a primary challenger. Gainesville Mayor Sam, I'm going to try to pronounce this here, Villian, is that correct?
Sounds
right?
about right. Yeah.
Has said he said earlier this week that he will be running against Clyde in the primary, and he is, quote, someone who will deliver results, according to the AP News article. So it's not just David Scott, Andrew Clyde as well, guys.
I don't know a whole lot about the mayor. Just looking at his profile on the Gainesville City website, he's been there since 2013. So he's been reelected numerous times. The folks up there must like him. So he's a UGA grad in 1994 with communications and works in the insurance business.
Yeah.
So
for all of Pye's criticisms of Andrew Clyde, the one thing I really like Andrew Clyde on is civil asset forfeiture. He is a civil asset forfeiture reform advocate, and I would hate to lose him just for that, because there need to be more voices that are advocating for that in Congress. And I don't know anything about the mayor, so it'll be interesting to see how the Freedom Caucus rallies around him, if they do at all, and what type of outcome we'll see in that primary, and how much money will be spent.
The House Freedom Fund.
I was just going to this isn't the first primary challenge that Congressman Clyde has faced since he's been elected. So, and he's survived them. I have no idea what's going to happen in this one. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, and I just got to say that I know that the House Freedom Fund really blew through the money it had raised in the last cycle, defending Scott Perry, as well as I think a couple of other members. The dude out here in my neck of the woods, whose name I can't even remember. Fun fact about that, though, this is speaking of quick hits. This is a quick one. This is funny to me. So John McGuire beat the then House Freedom Caucus chairman in his primary in Virginia's 5th Congressional District. The guy who replaced McGuire in the Virginia State Senate, you know what his name is?
No.
John Kennedy?
Lou Cipher. Luther Cipher. That is his name.
Lucifer?
Luther Cipher. It's SC, excuse me, a CIFER. That is the spelling of his last name.
Lucifer.
His first name is Luther. He goes by Luther. But I mistakenly call him Lou Cipher. But if you shorten Luther, you get Lou Cipher.
We're in the end times.
In this day of QAnon, I just thought it was hilarious.
We are in the
why
end
haven't they
times.
lasered in on that guy. Wow.
Like Google it. I'm dead serious. This is like, I'm not joking. So real fast before we go, I do want to say happy birthday to John Vestal, who I know will get a shout out as one of our Patreons. John, I am sorry that I missed reaching out to you. I don't have your phone number. I do have your email address. But I hope you had the happiest of birthdays. And then this will be my last Peach Pundit podcast, or Peach Pundit the podcast, for 2 weeks. I am leaving. Although I will still be at home on Wednesday of next week, we are going to be getting ready for the last minute preparations, packing. And since Reagan will be here dealing with her packing her stuff too, to head to Western North Carolina, where Emily and I will be getting married on Saturday, February 8th.
Yay, congratulations.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
for those of you who don't know, Emily and I have been friends for more than 20 years. And when we just got lucky and happened to, I reached out to her one day and we were talking, and it's like, hey, do you want to date? And that's kind of where it's been ever since. And I told someone yesterday that I was stressed out. Scott knows. Scott, this is why I talked to Scott yesterday, that I've been stressed out lately. Part of it's because of the wedding, and it's not just, it has nothing to do with, I feel like I'm I'm just so fortunate to have Emily in my life and to have Reagan. Reagan has softened me up. I never thought that I would be anything close to a father. even though I'm not her father, I'm her stepdad. But I have learned a lot from that child. I have learned a lot from Emily, and I'm truly very, very lucky, and very excited to marry this girl. So yeah,
Aw.
I'll shut up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
I think Buzz and I are both very, very
Absolutely.
happy for you.
100%,
And
brother.
I would love to know where the softer version of Jason Pie is. That's
You want to see the softer version of me? The softer version of me is when Reagan, because we have this. I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before or not. We have this thing called Reagan bombs, and what this consists of, because she's 9, but she's tiny, and so Tracker, our dog, is like 52 pounds. Reagan can't be much heavier than her. So Reagan bombs consist of me picking her up and lifting her up as high as I can, and then just tossing her on the bed. And she'll sometime more is what she says, or will negotiate the number of Reagan bombs in advance. And sometimes I'm like, look, I've had a long day. Let's do like 2. And she'll always get me. She'll start high because she knows I want to negotiate. She knows I'll negotiate with her. She'll say 6, and I'm like, how about 4? She'll go 5. I said, 4 is meeting you in the middle, kid. Like, take your win and walk away. But she, if you want to see me soft, see me around Reagan, and that kid knows, and she has learned very quickly that Jason doesn't say no when she wants something.
Welcome to the life of a girl dad, my friend.
And enjoy it.
Hard to say no to them.
It passes so fast.
So
there's going to be a moment when you're not able to lift her up over your head.
So I know. And tonight will consist of writing a script for our officiant, who I mentioned last week, Van Jones. I was able to buy he's booked. He's ready to go, and
awesome.
Writing our vows to each other too. So
excellent.
So,
well,
but
blessings on you.
Thank you.
On you
thank
both.
you. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Scott.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Peach Pundit podcast. A couple of newsletters. We send out a newsletter. It's infrequent. It's whenever I get time to do it, really. And they come out more often during the legislative session because there's more Georgia-based things. There's more content to share with you. It's completely free. Head on over to peachpundit.com, sign up for that. We got a feedback from one of our subscribers who responded saying, this is some right-wing bullshit. And I just decided that was the perfect way to advertise the newsletter because...
Sorry, Miss Laura.
Sorry, Miss Laura. What did you think you were signing up for? Anyway, also, another newsletter is the Burt Jones, Lieutenant Governor's newsletter. We'll link to it on the article accompanying this podcast on the blog. Great source of where, we have not done them justice. You can hear from their own words the legislative priorities and how things are progressing from the Lieutenant Governor's office. I found it to be a good use, a good resource. The people who rock are the people who voluntarily reach into their pocket every month and throw us a couple bucks, starting at $5. It's completely voluntary. You don't have to do this, but it really helps us. The money is used to keep the site running. It also gives our Patreons extra content if they sign up at certain tiers. And there is also, on the way, the Peach Pundit shop, which will have merchandise with our logo on it, as well as pithy sayings that we often say here. One of our T-shirts will be "Sorry, Miss Laura," and I think it's a beautiful T-shirt. It's the best T-shirt, and it has a Peach Pundit logo on it as well. And Miss Laura, if you're listening, tell me your size. You get one for free. Our people who rock are Tony West, our friends at Americans for Prosperity, Ari Schaefer, Benjamin Hurst, Bill Werkheiser, Bo Brannon, Brett Harrell, Colin Martin, Jeff Cobble, Hank Burnham, James Hall, John Vestal, Jordan Reed, Mike Buchert, Reed Powell, Rob Lee and Leasix Media, Ron Daniels, Ryan Graham, Ryan Purvis, Shannon Ferguson, Stuart Wilkinson, and our anonymous contributor. Peach Pundit Podcast is Jason Pye, Buzz Brockway, and me, Scott Turner. It's produced, published, and owned by me, Scott Turner, and all the music you hear is original by Jason Pye. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.